Hey there, DM Gemer, excuse me. It's midweek. But I'm John Sarakis, and this is The Climb, brought to you by the Digital Mastermind. Our show is about journeys. It's a podcast where we talk to digital agencies about business, marketing, and technology. So if you want the best tips, tricks, tools, mentorship, you want to be a mentor, then we have a tribe that you want to join. It's of digital agency owners. We stay in constant contact, helping each other with our woes and issues, and also our celebrations via Slack group. So all your questions or concerns are answered. We also have bi-weekly calls to stay on top of the latest and greatest. And we have a fantastic yearly meeting, which is coming up on October 4th, 5th, and 6th in beautiful, sunny Viva Las Vegas. So if you want to grow your agency, go ahead and contact me. But that's not the only reason we're here. We're here for you. And today is a show about prospecting. And to keep this show going with the energy that it has, I'd like you to go ahead and subscribe to our Facebook, YouTube channel and get notified of all of our upcoming shows. And before we get into everything, I want to let you know that this is live. So we welcome all the interaction that you can throw at us, comments, questions, anything. Feel free to chime in at any time. And I also have a fantastic co-host who's David McGraw. Dave, why don't you come out here and join us?
Good morning. Almost afternoon.
It's almost afternoon. We got 13 more minutes. I think it's just for all the excitement based on our topic today, which is prospecting, sales outreach, and lead generation. What was your, if any, have you ever even done any of that, prospecting or sales outreach or lead generation?
No, it's been the most, painful aspect for me building a business, and which is why I sought out a merger with you, because I was like, I need a sales-oriented person. My brain doesn't work like that. I just can't. It does not sound fun.
So, but I'm sure you get nailed with a ton of messages, as I do, right? With everybody trying to outreach to you.
100%. Every time we win an award, we get put on a mailing list. Every time that, we get listed on Clutch or sites like Clutch, we're getting put on a mailing list. And you can tell it's almost like clockwork. We apply for something, we get our name out there, and then the next 2 weeks is nothing but prospecting emails.
Sales trigger. It's a sales trigger where a lot of organizations use that. We get the award and then we get hit. Yeah. The number that I get for companies looking to buy companies, other companies that are selling, name something, fill in that gap. Even before this, when we were doing prep, I got a cold call from an automated cold call for somebody trying to sell car, ongoing warranty services, right? So it never ends.
That and the, hey, I'm in the neighborhood and I'm looking to buy houses, or I'll give you a cash offer.
Yep.
Jesus.
I got that
that's
too.
Just a lead service. That's not even somebody really wanting to buy your house. I imagine all they do is package that lead up and then sell it to a realtor.
That's it. Absolutely. And then they sell it 5 or 10 times. So They tell them, oh yeah, you want to buy a lead? It's only $10. And then you buy that lead for $10. But no, they're actually making $100 a lead. And then it's a fight for whoever is going to be able to close it.
Right.
And I know there's all that negative stuff that we're saying there. This is the lifeblood of any business, because a business can only survive so long on its inbound or its referrals, right? It's a matter of time before one day that stops. And for the select few, they're going to be fine. They're always going to be there, and they can brag and pound their chest. But at the end of the day, people need a system and a process for prospecting.
Going back all the way to episode 7, when we started The Climb and we started this podcast, Jeff Wilson of 352 talked about inbound is great and it brings in steady, consistent business. But if you want bigger clients, you're not going to get them via inbound. You have to go shake hands. You got to press the flesh. You've got to go out and find them. And so I completely agree with that.
You got to go and get them. It's like a friend of mine who does a lot of dating apps. What he told me, he said, look, you're not going to get any of the 9s or the 10s on the dating apps. He said, because they got enough in the real world of people that are seeking them out. He said, it's for the 8s and below. And it's the same thing. If you want to go and get the big accounts or the accounts that you really want, you have to go and target them. And if you're going to target them, you need either an expert or you need to build a system and a process to do that. And that's why I wanted to speak to our guest, who is Dan Englander. And Dan is he's an author, he's an entrepreneur. He founded a company called Sales Schema. It's a site that helps companies win. It melds sales and digital marketing. He works with a lot of digital marketing agencies. And what we talked about is the importance of personalization and how you can do this on your own, as well as the things you need to think about if you're going to hire a company. And I can't put enough emphasis on, if you do not have a prospecting process, and that could be it could be going out networking, it could, whatever it is. If you don't have something that's outbound, you need to get something that's in place. So personalization, when you meet somebody, is the most important piece of that. And that's where that was the first place that we started in our conversation. So this next clip is, what is an example of a strong personal outreach message? And these are the messages that you get all the time, right? And they're probably, you're getting a lot of blanket ones, especially when they come from foreign countries, and there's a lot of cultural differences, although some of these countries are getting better at this. But what I wanted to know is, all right, what is an example of a strong personal outreach message? And I think that tees off a lot of this conversation.
So with, it's a fair concern. And I think that it really depends on our clients' goals, and everything that we write is going to be custom to them and their personality. And I think if you're doing this for yourself, obviously that will be the case. But what we've found is that even if we are lighter on the messaging and we say less about, what we're selling, pretty much everybody we reach out to and connect with knows it's for business purposes. They know that what the person wants, they know they have sales in mind. And then what we recommend to our clients, and I think what our better clients do, is just to be brutally honest, to just connect as humans and say, look, and a lot of the times we're taking an indirect path. Like if we find that we don't want to just beat our heads against the wall trying to get to the CMO all day if there's not a meaningful connection. So maybe we're getting somebody on with the head of HR or CTO. And in those situations, what we tell our clients to do is basically say, hey, I want to be brutally honest with you. I'd love to find a way to partner with your company. Can you help me out? And so, as opposed to like being snaky or trying to find some hide your intentions, just doing that can work wonders. And most people will say, yeah, let me refer you on. But even if you can't get referred on, even if you just have that connection, you can still use that. We have modules on this where we say, look, if you have a good connection with the CTO, hitting up the CMO and saying, hey, I had a really great conversation with your CTO last week. Thought I'd take a chance to reaching out. Here's what we're up to. Would you like to talk? Now you're in a completely different ballpark where that person's going to be much more likely to talk to you. So I think that, as long as you're talking to people at a high enough level, obviously not interns or something, in the right companies, good things are going to happen. So we're big believers in maintaining that activity, that sort of that volume, in order to make sure that things are going in the right direction, basically.
So Dave, what, if any, have you ever responded to an outreach message?
You asked me that in prep for the show, and I tried to think about one, and I really cannot think of a completely anonymous message that got me to do something. I don't know.
Never forwarded one to somebody else. Hey, check this out.
I mean, I think probably I have, but more on the technical, like, wow, this is possible. So on that, but I don't think I've ever purchased or reached out, but I did pass it on and say, hey, this is a thing now.
And that's what it comes down to, which I find is interesting about this. And I wanted to start with that clip because it's all right. This is personal. It's not going to be effective unless it's personal. On the other hand, if you just have something that's just so miraculous that everybody needs, you don't have any competitors, then that's a completely different game. But what we're talking about are saturated markets, right?
Right.
So it takes the personal touch, whether it's, and some people spend a ton of money on their outreach, whether it's in mail, they're sending iPads to people, right? Where you're going through and there's this video that plays that's in it, and then you get to keep the iPad after. But scaling personal is a very difficult thing.
So just this morning, I got a voicemail, and I played it, and it's a salesperson that was like, hey, Dave, I just want to follow up. I got a 2-minute video that I put together for you. Like, it was very personal, and He was like, it's in your mailbox right now. I was like, wow, and I went and looked at it, and there it was, and I deleted it.
Didn't even
watch it. Didn't even watch it.
I got guilted the other day when somebody made a video and they sent it to me, and I didn't open the email. And anybody that emails me sales stuff, by the way, I got a folder that I just save all the best ones in, and we just reuse them. So, and I'm sure a lot of sales pros do that as well. But she kept reaching out like, I took the time, Jon, to make you that video. And I was like, all right, let's see where it goes from here. Yeah, I know.
I didn't ask you to do that.
Think about that social motivator, right?
Yeah.
All right, yeah. I made you that video. It's like, oh, like it plays into the guilt. I just talked with a guy last week. His best opener, which I think I want everybody to steal this if you work in sales, is ask, how are you at the beginning of the message? And he was showing me all of his results using the how are you versus not using the how are you.
Yeah. I mean, that reminds me of like my second job. My boss was like, dude, like your emails are just rubbing people the wrong way. I'm like, why? He's like, you have no nicety at the beginning of your email. I'm like, what? We're doing a job here. I'm just like, hey, I need this. And he's like, no, why don't you start off with like, hey, how's it going? Hey, can I get that? I'm like, what is that? It was just a lesson I had to learn.
You were overly direct.
Too direct.
Direct. Yep. I think I was on the opposite side of that, where I worked for a company, and I always enjoyed writing, and I would write these emails that were like all flowing, and I would use big words. He's like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Right.
He's like, dude, you're not writing, something to Shakespeare here. He's like, you're just writing a communication from one person to the next. And he's like, be nice, but get to the point. Yeah. Like, oh, all right. Well, let's say that we're doing these personal outreach messages, right? I'm tongue-tied today. And we want to understand, what are some great ways to build that initial engagement via email? We're getting them all the time. So what are those ways? And this is what Dan says about that.
There's probably a few dozen things that we've tried in the past, and there's not one that works for everybody. But I think a lot of them, honestly seem kind of basic, but very few people are taking the time to actually research these things and then follow up with people over email. I think the channel matters a lot too. Like if you're, pulling some piece of data that's imminently accessible, like, hey, saw you were founded 5 years ago, or you just got funding on Crunchbase, and then you're just doing that on like a LinkedIn. That's a little bit different than if you are taking time to write a certain type of message that reads more like the tone of a message that you might get after you've connected with somebody, like at a networking event back when that was a thing we could do. So anyway, to answer your question, other things that we've tried are looking at account experience. So we might, like if our clients have worked for a giant account, like it's Coca-Cola, let's just say, then we can identify people that used to work there that have since moved on to other companies that our clients can work with, and say, hey, we've done a lot of work with Coca-Cola. Saw you were there. Looks like you're doing compelling work now. Here's what we're up to. Would it make sense to connect? That, like, even just phrasing it like that, just a little bit further back, a little bit more tasteful. It sends a different type of message. And what we tend to see is like some of those most common responses that we see are like people saying like, I never respond to this sort of thing, but there's something different about this. So I thought I'd take a chance at it. So I think that's important. And I could probably go on, but that's one that comes to mind.
You don't get any of the messages that have an alma mater in there or anything?
I've had one. So, going through these clips and getting it ready for the show, I could see why his tactics are successful, because I don't feel like he talks about his aspect or his communications like the prospecting I get. Like to me, the ones that I get, I feel very impersonal. They're just throw shit against the wall, see what sticks, and I don't respond. But how he describes it, it's very like get personal, get relatable.
Absolutely. And he gets into like less is more, right? So it's about the quality over quantity, which I think is a fantastic approach. But it's super time consuming to dig into somebody's profile, right?
Right.
and find that commonality and then go ahead and send that out. But that's where this game's going. It's because the mass spray and pray spam method isn't working anymore.
No.
I had this one. I've got a few over the years that were just absolutely exceptional salespeople calling in, and one of them, it started with, "Oh, hey man, I went to USF too, and all that and everything." But where he failed was in our second conversation, and it was analytics software. Where he failed in the second conversation was there was somebody else in the office that said something. He's like, "Oh yeah, that's where I'm from." And I said, "Well, when did you move to Florida?" He's like, "I never lived in Florida." And I was like, "Well, how the hell did you go to USF?"
Right.
You know? And he's like, "Oh, did I say I went to USF?" I was like, "That lying little piece of shit." I was like, "Dude, like no relationship should ever start with a lie." And that's how he started it. Other than that, he got in, everything was going smooth. We probably would have bought it. I don't know. But yeah. So an underlining thing is make sure it's genuine. If it's not authentic, then don't do it.
Correct.
If you hate dogs, then don't put that in there. Oh, hey, I love Fluffy.
Right.
All right. So let's say you're going to start prospecting. You're going to be a DIYer. You're going to do it yourself. Here's what Dan would recommend.
Great question. So I think that there's going to be work no matter which way you cut it in order to create the sort of personalization that you need to get meetings. So the question is just where the work lives. What most people are doing is they're having the work live in terms of like positioning and creating like really complex funnels and drip sequences and all that, and then playing a numbers game with that. And I think that that's gotten less effective for technical and psychological reasons I could talk about for a long time. So to answer your question, I think that if somebody's DIYing this, a lot of it's about simplifying the channels, and really maybe you're just starting over email. It's just a simple right words to the right people. Don't worry as much about like the drip sequence and this sort of thing yet. But really thinking about, okay, I want to make a list of whatever, 100 people that I'm super well connected with and that are likely to talk to me in my field. So I think really simplifying it and putting the work more about the prospect identification, as well as writing, a really tasteful message, is the important thing. And from there, another thing that I like to kind of like harken back on is that for some reason, especially in the agency world, agencies are really like down to go crazy for their clients. They're down to come up with really weird, Seth Godin, purple cow ideas and throw everything at the wall. But for themselves, like everybody seems to be looking for like a step-by-step checklist. So I would say like, throw it on its head, like stop looking for the checklist as much and just kind of put some of that same creative energy to yourself. So maybe you're writing a funnier message. Maybe you're, doing something that you haven't seen as many salespeople do in the past to go after those people that are already kind of connected with you in areas that, where you can do really well and so on.
Those are the things that take time. There's some people that are injecting jokes in them and all these others, and all that takes time and energy.
So that clip just gave me a great idea for ourselves. First point I want to make is, hey, man, every episode we do, don't we basically come to the same conclusion that agencies don't put the energy they need to for themselves?
Every goddamn time.
Yeah. So that's A. And then B, talking about his strategies. Earlier I sent you that little title that Audible is now adding captions to their audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
And we should send out an email newsletter to our customers saying ADA is out of control. And then put that in there. Get them thinking about what ADA compliance is. Maybe that's anyone listening, feel free to steal that tip. But I mean, that's the first thing that popped in my head when I read that headline was like, wait a second, you need captions for listening to people reading a book? Why don't you just read the book?
Yeah.
So,
I was on a government website today. We were looking for one of our clients is doing a big opening and whatnot. I was helping out one of the account managers. And how bad the sites have to be now because of ADA. Like it could be a beautiful government site, but no, everything goes flat and whatnot. So I agree. ADA is out of control. I think that could be a strong message. I think in my talk with him, I said, I think it was like cupcakes and shotguns, right? As the old subject line, right? Whatever it takes to get somebody to open it. But then once they open it, you have to deliver on it. So
right.
There's just a lot of time that has to take place in there. And the other thing too is, if you don't do this right and you do all this at scale, your domain can be blacklisted. It can be considered spam. So there's a lot of delicate things you have to do in here to make sure that it's not only effective, but it's not detrimental to you.
All right.
All right. So speaking of that, doing the outreach, I'm one of those people that I go through like, all right, what is the, what is this? What is this? And then the next question was, what is the best outreach platform? And this is what Dan said about that.
Question. So I hate to say like XYZ is dead. I think there's probably somebody making passenger pigeon work right now. It depends who you're going after. I think that if you're selling to like roofers that are running around between job sites or something, probably outbound or LinkedIn is not going to work as well. Our experience is more focused on, going after like mid to large companies. So in that world, email, LinkedIn, phone can all be effective. Then there's the whole inbound world of ads and ABM and all that stuff. So again, I think it's contextual a little bit. I do think LinkedIn has gotten harder, and it's gone from being, it's gone from maybe middle of funnel back to top of funnel, because it's the barrier to getting somebody to agree to speak to you from like a LinkedIn request has probably gotten harder overall. It doesn't mean there's not exceptions. There's just so much more noise on that channel than there was before. So I do think that email is anti-fragile in a way, because nobody owns it. Once you get used to doing it and building lists and doing outreach, it's something that you can kind of do forever. While deliverability has gotten harder, it's also a good thing because we get less spam and so on. And at the end of the day, in order for email to function, if you really think about it, you're going to have to be able to send a message to somebody you don't know. Otherwise, email doesn't work. So in that way, I don't want to, forever is a long time, but I think that it's only gotten stronger. Like email is something that is not going away, and it's something that you can own. Like we've seen changes happen every 5 minutes to every social media platform. It used to be if you had a Facebook group, you actually could broadcast content to them, and now it's basically a pay to play model for the most part. I've heard rumblings about LinkedIn going the same way and it becoming a lot like Facebook and just almost or 80% pay to play. So I'm a big believer in owning, your own outreach channel. So that's why I think email is still a really good place to play, basically.
I know people that are still doing fax blasts to the Medicare or in the medical field. So I think he's dead on. Whatever works for you is what you need to focus on. Email is so readily available. It's really inexpensive if you can do it right, granted the time. Direct mail still works in some areas. So I think that was great advice.
So something topical that's current is, Instagram is removing the number of likes that you see on a post.
Yep.
My wife's company relies, their entire channel is Instagram, so they rely on this. And I just, when she told me, when we discovered this, I was like, why would Instagram do that? And all they're doing is prepping the pay to play model and removing, they're removing your knowledge of how popular a post is so that you can't question why nobody's seeing it.
Drugs.
Because if you're not paying for it, nobody's going to see it.
Yep, they get you hooked, and then they really put the hooks in. So what are you guys going to do? You guys going to pay for advertising?
So I just listened to that and I go, she's already collecting all these email addresses. Why doesn't she have an email list? And every time that they send out a blast on Instagram, should be sending out an email blast as well. So if she's listening, she might pick up on that idea. But yeah, I'm gonna help her develop an email list.
This is where she's gonna get the data from, man. This is how she's gonna grow. What's it called? My little flower patch?
The little flower bunch.
Oh, I was close. It's close. Yep. Yeah. And so with us, we've looked at we got a pretty good stream of leads that come in right now. But I am looking at platforms. I spoke with others, and I love the topic of the personalization. What I don't like about email currently is just the saturation, the number of emails that everybody's getting. Also, if it's not done right, and I've done this multiple times in the past, and I really haven't had the best results. And except for one kid, there was this one kid, I think he ran himself out of business. He would go to somebody's website and he would do an analysis on it. And I don't know how he put together these presentations. I could probably still find them in a folder. And then he would send them to them, and then he would get us conversations. He got us a lot of conversations. I can't remember if we got any deals out of that. But after a while, he just stopped responding. We couldn't figure out how to pay him. And I don't know. I think he just disappeared. But it was the time and the personalization for us pointing out what it had to happen on somebody's website to bring that in. So there was value there in that conversation.
But we've had clients send those emails to us. They would get hit up with, somebody says, "Oh, your website's chock full of errors," and then the client sends it to us, and they're like, "You're not doing your job." And I'm like, "We can address these if you want, but it's not going to do anything for you, or it's not impacting you, or this is fake reward." There's those people will say anything, and every developer, every IT person thinks the other people suck. So
always. And people do this with AdWords, right? Well, they'll look at somebody's failing AdWords, they'll run an analysis. Maybe they yeah, absolutely. And you come in swinging with that. And then also we look at channels, right? LinkedIn. How I get so many LinkedIn requests based on people that have lead generation or something that are in their titles. The really smart ones don't have that in their titles, and those are usually the ones I accept. And then 2 minutes later, I get the message, "Hey, would you like to grow your agency and 10x your next year?" It's like, dude, all right. So we're disconnecting now. That's not a great way to start a relationship.
So the first people that were doing those LinkedIn things were probably very successful. And then they told everybody how successful they were. And now everybody does it. And now it's noise and it's zero successful. So,
yeah. And it's concentric circles, right? We're at the epicenter. So it's starting to bleed out into some of the others. But I believe it's one of the things that is beginning to hurt LinkedIn pretty badly, and based on their connection requests. And a lot of people are now changing it to their email. Connected with somebody the other day. If I wouldn't have had his email, I wouldn't have been able to connect with him because he's just sick and tired of being sick and tired. Yeah,
it's very spammy. LinkedIn. Not only is it spammy with the outreach, but the content is like, it's not even. It's like, I guess my news feed is just TED Talks and political bullshit. And it's like, this is LinkedIn, huh?
Do you watch a lot of TED Talks?
No.
Oh,
no, just people sharing.
Yeah. Huh. So, I see. And granted, I believe they've used a lot of their AI, if you will, to curb that conversation based on the things that you like. Because if you like somebody's post, you're going to see everything they got for like the next few weeks.
And I try to support the people that I like and then that I support. And so that's where it comes from. I mean, I know a lot of people that like TED Talks.
There you go. Yeah, a lot of smart people. Yeah, I'm a fan of TED Talks. All right. So as you go down your journey, whatever platform it is, it's good to know what to do and what not to do. And what Dan said about that when asked, "What are the hell no's? Can't believe people are still doing that because it doesn't work." This is what he said.
Yeah, it's funny because we've actually not divorced ourselves from it, but we've pulled back a little from looking. I think a lot of it, kind of comes down to just the tone of messages, and the too much of a shotgun approach, not really focusing on who you're talking to and being too vague, with what you're selling and who you're selling it to. When you do that, the problem is, and this is kind of going down a rabbit hole of deliverability stuff. The way it works is, if enough people click that manual spam button, then your domain might be toast and you might not be able to get messages through for a while. You kind of go into this purgatory. So I think that throws a wrench in the gears more than other things. So I think it really just stems back to just people playing too much of a numbers. Yeah, it still is a numbers game. Volume matters, but you don't want to turn that knob up way too high. Personalization is more important. So you want to kind of get it to a dynamic where even if somebody might not want to talk to you right now, they're at least not mad at it. They're like, "Oh, I'm okay with you being in my inbox." That's kind of what you're going for. So with that, there's all sorts of violations. I wish I had some funnier examples, but they kind of escape me right now. I think it's mostly just going too hard in the paint. And also like just the tone of like, do you have 15 minutes? I think that is less effective, than thinking about, does it make sense to talk? I think that's kind of a better question. And one exercise that's really helpful if you're DIYing this is come up with something that's tasteful, and then go to your spam box and read through like 20 messages, and then make sure it doesn't look like those, make sure it looks visibly different. A lot of the times with subject lines, we're not getting weird. We're saying, hey, intro between me and you, or like something that's very clear and genuine, not really masking any intentions or anything like that.
I think some other do's and don'ts are don't use a damn Gmail address.
Oh God,
dude, I hate that. I get the Gmail instantly. I'm like, no, we're not talking. It doesn't matter.
Even like some of our clients that still use it, it's like, what are you doing? Like, get a domain, branded email. Like,
get a grow up, act like a professional.
Right.
Get those stains off that shirt, cowboy. Come on, come in the office. Now, I think other you guys offers a great piece of advice. Go through your spam box, see what's in there. Don't sound salesy, spammy. People are doing that, and also there's words that'll just get you thrown into a spam box that I think some people don't realize. When deal, free, anything like that. So I'd really analyze those before you start building your own. And then, which gets to the next question. I asked him, like, how much time should somebody spend on their prospecting? I used to have on my calendar, it was like the first hour, I think, or 2 hours. I can't remember. It was prospecting time before I had another system, and it was a great time. You're either learning about it or doing it. Because I read in a book, I think it was Prospecting Simplified, which I recall as being a good book. Nobody defaults to prospecting. Like, you have to have that in place. So, but you come up with a question, right? Let's say that you're doing double duty. You might be an account manager, or you're not doing business development full time, or you are doing business development full time, and you're also responsible for closing deals and prospecting. So you got to look at how much time you can spend. But this is what Dan says to that question: how much time should someone spend on their prospecting?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, of course, it depends on the more the better. Right? If you had like a dedicated role or a dedicated team, even better. That's where we're looking to be. So, in a perfect world, 40 hours a week, but you work with what you have, right? So, I think that if you're in a boutique agency or whatever, any company, and you're an owner, an executive, or you're in a split role where you're balancing sales and client service, it may be that you're budgeting, like a couple hours a day to calls. And then maybe 1 or 2 hours a week, maybe you have a certain day and time where you're doing follow-up, and you're basically reaching back out to people that are prioritizing, bottom of pipeline, and then going back up to the person you talked to 60 days ago where the timing wasn't right, and that sort of thing. And I think that whole pipeline work, like that process, is pretty tough to automate. Yes, there's little shortcuts. You might be able to do a mail merge with a bunch of people every so often, but you're not just going to like click a button and have that machine take over. It takes somebody budgeting time to that process. That's probably what I would say.
I think one of my big takeaways from that too is everybody tries to overly automate. They try to leverage technology for all of this stuff, and they lose the feel of the controls, right? Just because you have a fighter jet doesn't necessarily mean you're going to use everything in it. If you took one of those jalopy planes that the Wright brothers had, you could probably get a lot of the same stuff done without nearly the expense or the toll necessary to learn all those things that you probably aren't going to use anyway, that one day you just find out, I don't even feel like doing this. So I think it's super important. Like, just focus on the fundamentals.
The fundamentals are the talent, the skills that you need to do your job. The tool does not, replace the talent. It doesn't make, the jet fighter doesn't make the pilot a better. I mean, I guess maybe it could. It makes talent more talented.
Absolutely, but
it does not create talent.
Right? Do you need it? Like, okay, so let's say that we're just going to ship some packages, from Tampa to Houston. You don't need all that stuff. And right. It's so inefficient, right, to use that to do what you want to do. So I think it's working into that, just getting your process going. If you don't have the time to DIY it, then you need to look at having the resources to hire a company to do it. But I like how he talked about his system going at it from a funnel approach, which is really smart. We use a funnel approach. It's a pipeline, right? So, all right, where are things decaying? Where are things moving? but also, all right, what's coming in? You got to continually have things coming in. You got to continually close them. And it's just, all right, where are you going to spend your time? And at every agency, I believe this has to be somebody's role. If it's not, you're doomed, man. The worst things that are, could happen, will happen, and you're not going to have any deals in your pipeline. All right. So we covered time. Now, in time, this is something that I've spent a lot of time on, right? The next question was, how many follow-ups are recommended? This is what Dan says about that.
It's a good question. And it's funny, like with our approach, we're not as follow-up centric, at least before somebody's built the relationship. At the cold stage, we typically won't do like a drip sequence or a whole bunch of follow-ups because of the nature of our approach, which is much more one-to-one relationship building. And if you're constantly following up, you kind of lose the consistency of that. So I don't know if I have a specific number in terms of like cold follow-ups, but what I tend to think of it more as just at least have a filter that tells you, okay, this person hasn't been contacted in 30 days. And then you're thinking of a new campaign or a new way in. Maybe you're giving them content or inviting them on a webinar, but at least have something that's simple and tells you when that person, how long that person hasn't been touched. And internally for our processes is 30 days or something that tells our team, okay, this person hasn't been contacted. Is there a meaningful reason to reconnect? Do we have new work we can talk about? Has something changed on their end that we know about? Do we have a virtual event? Do we have a webinar? Do we put out something cool or interesting, podcast, whatever? And thinking of it more in terms of that sort of bespoke process as opposed to 5 touch points and then they're gone or something like that. I do think there's a place for that. I just don't know if it lives at the level of like bespoke kind of high ticket sales where you're in a boutique agency. I think that lives with bigger sales teams where they have so much data and they really can drill in on those numbers. But I think for us and our clients, it's usually a little bit more of a bespoke process, if that makes sense.
Follow-up's a funny thing, but regardless, in sales, there's a need for it. You're rarely ever going to get somebody on the first pop, whether it's on the prospecting side or on the, let's say that they're into the opportunity sales proposal side. But I have one, it was one client that we ended up pulling on, but I totaled up how many follow-ups, right? So these are outreach to follow-ups it took from the initial I don't think it's from the initial conversation, from the initial email all the way until it closed. It was 136. Now, I'm not by any stretch recommending that you follow up with somebody 136 times, but I think you take that delicate approach in figuring out like, all right, what needs to be followed up here to move that conversation along. And it turned out to be a decent account for quite some time. All right. So now that we know essentially how many follow-ups you should do, and a lot of this, if you're going to DIY it, you should build your own process, right? What works for you is not necessarily going to work for anybody else. There's also the best practices. Dan said, don't try to go with that crazy checklist area. He also mentioned they do it bespoke. So if you're going to do it, you should do it bespoke yourself or hire someone like him. But if we're talking about like response rates, right? Let's say that you're doing this for yourself. How many meetings should you expect from a decent campaign? And this is what he said.
Yeah, I think, to kind of put a number to it and be less coy, I think probably like a 2 to 4% meeting rate's pretty good. Like if you got a list of 100, you should at least be scraping up, a handful of meetings, 2 to 4 from that. Assuming you've got a good way in and, people are reading the message and then there's other stuff that is going to be based on your offer and just the nature of your market and those sort of things. Yeah.
All right. Get some meetings. You got out of 100. You could even beat that. Maybe you get 8. Maybe you get 10 with a solid message, a solid campaign. Now, let's say that your back's up against the wall. You're 30 days away from your agency going out of business, or you're 30 days away from not hitting your sales goals. If you don't get sales in the door, what should you do?
Could they employ it? I think it's the main strategy that you should use. If you're about to go out of business, you're in crisis mode or something. You want to think about, okay, well, first and foremost, you want to, and I know I'm losing your question a little bit, but if for the person that is in crisis mode, your first place is the people that are already paying you or have paid you, that they're likely to pay you again. So that's the closest orbit. And then outwards from there are the people that, might have paid you in the past and then they dropped off. And then it's your personal networks, the people that you already know. And then beyond that is kind of what we're talking about here, which is the people you might not know. They're in the next orbit out, but they're likely to have a connection to you, even if I'm not necessarily just saying LinkedIn second degree or something like that, but people that have some commonality with you is the next most likely group. So I think that's where you should put your energy. Yeah.
Dave, you ever been 30 days from going out of business?
Yes, 100%. And pound the pavement. I didn't do it via email, and this was way back in the day. So, I guess I did. I guess I did use email. I just used my network, and I just kept hitting them up until there was a project that I could help out on.
Yep. You got to do whatever you got to do. Some people just fold up like a lawn chair. Others like, all right, I gotta figure this out.
It was a big moment in my life, not just business life, but in my real life. That's like, okay, when faced with some real terrible situation, what am I made of? What am I going to do? So maybe that was just too anecdotal, but I look back at that moment and I go, all right, we can beat anything.
Yeah, no, and I think it's those types of accomplishments that you build on and you move forward. But the art of it is not relying on what you did in that situation and making sure that you're continually just taking the steps forward so you don't get back in that situation.
Correct. And back in that day, I was 100% reliant on referrals. And so, like when the economy turns and your referral network gets damaged, then your referrals get damaged. So that's why I knew in order to grow to the next level, we had to bolt on a sales team.
Yep, I'm into that. And speaking of sales teams, I would say to some respects that we're specialized. We're specialized in SEO development and some of these others, but and we work with companies of all shapes and sizes. Some would argue that we're generalists, right? And generalists, it's been the trend for quite some time, don't compete well in markets against specialists. And of course, I want tips for generalists. So these are some tips for generalists that Dan provided.
So I think it is getting tougher for unspecialized agencies, and I think I've sort of changed my thinking on this. I used to say niched as well, and now I think of it more like in terms of specialization, where an agency might have like a handful of verticals they work with, but there is a through line between those verticals. Maybe it's finance and medical and high compliance, or it's growth stage consumer brands, but there is a through line, or they're specialized, and or by service, maybe it's influencer or whatever, media, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that if none of the above applies to you and you really are just this sort of journeyman agency bouncing around, that's fine. I just think just know that it's going to be tougher to build scalable new business channels. And we have talked to agencies in that world. We can't usually help them, and they're like, "This is what I want to do," and I'm just like, "Okay, just know what you're getting into." So I think that really is the foundation for everything, is really figuring out that specialization, and then from there, everything else becomes a lot easier. I think in terms, to get tactical, like if a client of ours is a little bit more agnostic in terms of who they can work with, then we can always kind of like specialize them by way of the copy, and I think that can really help a lot. Just having a part of your copy that says, hey, we tend to be a fit for these types of companies or companies at this stage. Let me know if it makes sense to talk right now. And that can go a long way. That can actually just having a little bit of pre-qualification in the email after you've established that connection can actually get you more calls than if you didn't have it, even if people aren't quite at that stage yet. So that's something worth mentioning.
And specialization is, it's angles, right? And like a mirror, you're showing somebody what you want, and you can do that if you're a generalist. You can take a case study. Let's say that you worked in education, and that's the drum that you can beat as you begin contacting these people. And I don't think enough people do that. They don't take that story or that case study and focus on that. And I believe having specializations can be numerous, right? You can have tons of different ones just based on the projects that you worked on. You don't have to solely focus your position on this one thing, which I think is very limiting in a lot of capacities, especially based on what we saw with pandemic and COVID. It can be very dangerous.
I think the generalist can be a specialist in its own way by
That's what I'm saying.
applying that whatever you unlocked, whatever expertise you unlock, figuring out what other industries can you go send this to and go sell this to. That is how a generalist thrives.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So you're specialized in specific industries or platforms or technologies or however you want to phrase that.
Specialized in solutions.
Yep. And I think there's so much emphasis, and there's a ton of experts that are just preaching that, like, oh, on the homepage of your website, this is your value proposition, and these are all the people you work with and all the people that you don't. And I think, all right, I get it. But at the end of the day, you can do that with just a landing page and some case studies. And that's what you market to from an outbound perspective. It doesn't have to be this, all right, no, we don't work with any of those people, which it's way too limiting, especially if you have tons of business coming from tons of different angles.
All right.
All right. So saturated spaces. This is, what are the most saturated and hard to get responses from? What are those spaces look like? This is what Dan said.
Yeah, that's tough. Well, I think that there's areas where, that are hurting because of the situation. Obviously, like in-person events are struggling really badly. And I think that the ones that hang in there are the ones that are, going to have a moat around them, which is once this is over. So there's some obvious stuff like that. I think that, web design, development, creative services is always is tough. That said, I think that, there's also companies that have huge advantages there just based on the case studies and based on, specialization. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that there's just like disciplines that are oversaturated. I think the problem is what's oversaturated is the sort of like agnostic agency that just does anything and everything for anyone. I think that overall is saturated. I think that anybody that, is willing to sort of like put their flag up and say, this is where we do business, this is where we don't, is gonna be stronger for it. There's risk in that too. Like if you niche down to restaurants at the beginning of whatever last year or something, that was a bad move, and now you might be in real trouble. But I think the risk of doing nothing is a more definite, is a bigger, more legible risk rather.
I love how I say something and then I totally forget what clip's coming up next, and it like completely contradicts like what I said. What the hell, dude? I mean, I haven't seen that clip for a few days, and it's just like, that comes up, and but he's right. And I guess, all right, cool. I'm willing to say this is my position and where I stand on it, and then when things, but I mean, at the end of the day, we offer a bespoke approach. I feel like I'm now defending my position. We offer a bespoke approach, because we also work with agencies, and everything that we do is bespoke, and we're damn good at what we do. But do we only work with pest control companies that are $2 million? No. Do we only do SEO? No. Are there fantastic companies that do that? Absolutely. Are they probably going to be better at their outreach campaigns than us? I would suspect so. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do outreach just because we're going to have half the response that they do. If our margin's covered and we're profitable, that's the approach that we have to go. And also, if we're hedged based on any of the things that happen in our environment, whether industry related or government related, I think that is a healthy way to own a business. And that path moving forward is substantially more comfortable than potentially, like you said, going with restaurants or hospitality and whatever those things can throw at you. And granted, there are fantastic companies that have pivoted through that. I don't want to take it away from them. But now my position defended, point made. We'll see. Yeah. All right. Well, I think this next clip, and I should have teed this up at the top. This is something that as soon as I heard it and what he said, I was like, I want to look into this more, because it's not something we've focused on. We've barely touched on it before. These are the areas with low hanging fruit.
There are precious few agencies that understand like really how to deal with Amazon. And it's and we're talking to a lot of them. It's a big focus for us right now. But the challenge is a lot of the times that working in that space requires you to become like a consultancy, where you're dealing with inventory, you're dealing with we can't just sell the heck out of our client, because then they'll run out of inventory, and then Amazon will slap them down, and there's all sorts of things, and it's a completely different ecosystem, and the same things that exist outside of it are going to exist on it, but there's precious few agencies that get that. So I think that if you're already in that world, it's something to think about.
I heard that from somebody a long time ago. So if you get one takeaway from today, let's say you don't want to do any of this prospecting, you're trying to find a new service. Well, why don't you go ahead and look at servicing for Amazon? Because it sounds like there's a lot of space in there. And granted, you're going to want to prospect. You're going to want to drum up new business, talk to e-commerce clients. But I don't know, could be the next gold rush. Make sure that you have the pickaxe and you get there first. The next question, I ask a lot of people this question, but I love Dan's answer to this one. It was, what are most agencies doing wrong? And this is what Dan said.
I think the biggest thing is just sort of mindset, where sales gets treated as a downtime hobby, done out of necessity. Like we just won 3 big projects, so we can't get on sales calls right now. Where it's like, okay, what happens once those end? Do you want to just keep living like this, or do you want consistency? That's really the consistency and growth. Even if you don't want to take over the world or grow massively, if you ever want to sell your agency, if you ever want to just be able to choose your clients instead of the other way around, do compelling work, and not have this like hair on fire moment every 3 months, it's going to take building that scalable channel, or hopefully a few scalable channels. And to do that, you need consistency. So ideally, maybe you're hiring a company like ours, or if you don't hire us, maybe you're hiring a junior level sales employee, like somebody that is eventually in that seat to do that 40 hours a week or more. But if you're not there yet, it's really about budgeting time and treating it like you're going to the gym. Like this isn't something you get to stop doing just because you're busy or because you're not busy or whatever. It's something that has to be going all the time.
Consistency is key. And I've met some of those the hobbyist salespeople that when it's hot they're all freaking out, and when it's not they feel that they're fat and hungry. Because they have the projects, but then it destroys the fabric, I would say, of the company once they lose either they lose those accounts, especially if it's eat what you kill model with projects, or when they dry up. So I think for a healthier company, absolutely make sure that you have a prospecting system in place. You can either DIY and do it yourself. There's a thing called the internet, has tons of information. We actually have a couple other episodes that talk about this. You can hire a company like Dan's called Sales Schema, but make sure that you have some type of through line that is continually putting projects and accounts into your pipeline. Other than that, Dave, is there any final words that you would like to share with our audience?
I would only say that if you're trying to figure out what to do, if you're not the type of person that does this naturally, like Jon, this is your world. This is not my world. And if you're listening to us right now and this is not your world and you don't have someone to do it, find someone, partner with somebody, merge with somebody, find someone to do it, because you cannot rely on word of mouth forever.
Great advice. I love that. And to that, you want to talk with others that are doing this, join the DMG. Go ahead and shoot me an email, Jon, Jon at digitalmastermind.com. Other than that, go ahead and like and subscribe. We got Facebook, we got LinkedIn, we got YouTube. All you got to do is look up Digital Mastermind, and there we will be. The show is called The Climb. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Dan, for all of your time. Until next time, have some fun. Bye now.